How would you define marriage? A few years ago, there was the Defense of Marriage Act in America. It was in 1996. And it defined marriage as a legal union between one man and one woman. This act was designed to prevent individual states from legalizing same-sex marriages. And this act was ruled to be unconstitutional in July of this year by a federal district court in Massachusetts. The judge said that it infringed on states' rights, particularly the 5th and the 10th Amendments, and the judge believed that the states have a sovereign right to define marriage as the states choose to do so. And so in America, even within the last few years, you can see that there are very different definitions of marriage. There have been many opinions on this subject throughout the years and in different places. There are a lot of places in history that encourage same-sex marriages, places like Greece and Rome. There are places and cultures where it is possible for one man to be married to several women. And you can see that in the ancient Near East, and you can see it in many parts of Africa today. And I have nods from my African friends. There are places in the world where it is possible for one woman to be married to several men. And you can see that in ancient Samaria, you can see that in Tibet and in Polynesia today. There are some cultures that permit adults to marry children. And you can see that in India and Saudi Arabia today. And there are cultures that permit incest in our world today. There's even more opinions on sexual relationships within the bonds of marriage. There are some that say that marriage should involve sex between the man and the woman only. And then there are other people that would permit various levels of sexual relationships as long as the spouse is okay with it. And there are even more opinions about how long the marriage relationship should last. There was an anthropologist whose name was Edward Westermark who said that marriage is a more or less durable connection. And then there are others that say that marriage lasts till death do us part. Edmund Leach, another famous anthropologist, said that you can't really define marriage, that each culture has to define marriage itself, and the way that one culture defines marriage shouldn't be imposed upon another culture. The problem is that different cultures are made up of individuals who rebel against God and His law. Human beings are very creative, and the ways in which they rebel against God often displays their creativity. There are endless ways in which human beings break the seventh commandment. The various definitions of marriage are testimony to the inventiveness of human beings when it comes to sexual sin. The seventh commandment forbids all sexual sin in a very simple, easy to remember summary. It says, "You shall not commit adultery." This simple summary forbids any sexual activity outside of the bonds of marriage. But the summary is just a summary. It's not everything that the Bible has to say about the subject. And so if you really, really want to understand what the seventh commandment is saying, it's good to look at the other things that the Bible says about sex as well. And you begin to understand some of the other practices that are forbidden. There are a lot of verses like Leviticus chapter 18 verse 22 and 1 Timothy chapter 1 verse 10 that forbid homosexuality. The Bible says it's wrong for a man to have sex with another man or for a woman to have sex with another woman. Deuteronomy chapter 27 verse 21 prevents any human being from having sex with an animal. And that was a problem in the ancient Near East. It also addresses what Americans would call transgender issues. There are a lot of Americans today that believe that it is okay for a man to become a woman or for a woman to become a man. And so a lot of people in America will seek to, a lot of men will seek to become as much of a woman as they possibly can by dressing as a woman, by identifying themselves as a woman, by doing the things that they can to become as much of a woman as possible. Even in the ancient Near East, this was a problem. And Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 5 forbids this sort of thing. It says it is a wrong sexual practice. And the Bible also forbids a number of other sexual perversions, like in Galatians chapter 5, verse 19. When you start to study what the entire Bible has to say about sex and what the entire Bible has to say about the seventh commandment, then you begin to understand that God created sex for human beings to enjoy. But the full pleasure that God intended for us can only be found if sex was used as it was created to be used. It has to remain within the bounds of marriage. If you're to get everything out of it, you should. And so any sexual activity outside of that bond is forbidden in the Bible. And so when we think about this summary, when we start to think about the seventh commandment, one of the questions that we really do need to ask is the original question. What is marriage? Here's a simple definition. It's one that you have in a little summary that is sitting out here on the table that you may have picked up as you're coming in. Marriage is a bond that is made in the presence of God between one man and one woman, excluding all others, and it can be dissolved only by the death of one of the participants. Marriage is a bond that is made in the presence of God between one man and one woman, excluding all others, and it can be dissolved only by the death of one of the participants. You can begin to see that original definition even in the first part of the Bible. When you look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, you read, "A man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." This original bond between Adam and Eve is something that was made in the presence of God, with God watching on. It is something that existed between the one man, Adam, and the one woman, Eve. And then later, after sin and death enter into the picture, we begin to see that the bond lasts as long as they both shall live. And you can see that in Mark chapter 12, verses 18 to 27. So, God's plan was to confine sex to a loving, committed relationship of marriage. But men, in their sinfulness, have created an endless number of variations on the original theme of adultery. We have failed to follow God's original plan, and in the process, we have missed out on everything that God has to offer. We've missed out on many of the blessings that we should have. Today, we're going to talk about 3 ways in which that is the case. We're going to talk about homosexuality, we're going to talk about adultery, and we're going to talk about lust. One of the most profound and rapid changes in my culture's concept on morality is its view on homosexuality. Within my own lifetime, homosexuality has gone from being a sin that you just about never heard of to a sin that is widely regarded by my society as being completely normal. I'm 38 years old. When I was a kid, no kid had any idea what the word homosexual meant. They had no idea what lesbian meant. It was just a word you never heard of because it was a word that never even had to be used. It was something that no one talked about because it was something that was not very common. But now, if you were to go and you're to talk to a little kid in America, then they probably have a classmate who has been adopted by lesbian parents. They know someone who is homosexual. Homosexuality is so common in America now that it has been completely accepted. Our cultures often affect the way that we as individuals see the world around us. Our cultures often affect the way that we as individuals see the world around us. Increasingly, people who say that they are Christians don't know exactly how they should respond to homosexuality. If you were to ask them, is homosexuality okay? A lot of them would say yes. If you were to say, should a homosexual be ordained as a pastor? A lot of people that would identify themselves as being Christians would say yes. That's